Greetings and welcome back to my channel on a Friday evening, and yes, I am home. I started dating this woman. She's kind of strange, but aren't they all? Anyway, if you watch my channel for any amount of time, you will know that as well as my fixation on jazz music and my love of electronic music, preferably 90s drum and bass and trip hop, and Brazilian music, and the Beatles, I have a deep place in my heart for the records of Steely Dan. There's Katie Lied. There is a Japanese Royal Scam. There is a Mobile Fidelity Labs Asia. I have a Japanese gaucho around here somewhere, but today I'm here to talk about these new reissues of Countdown to Ecstasy and Pretzel Logic, respectively their second and third albums. I have Can't Buy a Thrill around here somewhere, but Can't Buy a Thrill is sort of their... That record doesn't age as well for me as do most of all their other records, even though I love the song Fire in the Hole and Midnight Cruiser. I've kind of had it with Reelin' in the Years, but Dirty Work is great. But this is a great time, as I've said many times before. This is a golden age for record collectors and fans of vintage vinyl, and they're doing Steely Dan, and it's really exciting. They started this process last year, and I read before the end of this year, I think that was a typo, the Bernie Grundman remasters and then lacquers cut from digital files will all be released going right up through Gaucho. Now for the UHQR versions, those are $150, 45 RPM, Bernie Grundman cut from the original tapes. I think I am going to get Countdown to Ecstasy. I like that album actually better than Pretzel Logic. But as for these are cut from digital files. As I've said also in the past, I don't think it matters as much as doing the digital work, the transfers, the medium itself, as who is doing the work. One of the best sounding things I've ever heard that's digital files is the complete Bill Evans Sunday Night at the Village Vanguard box set was done from files, and it sounds fantastic, as does the very first Kraft jazz reissue of Monk and Coltrane, all done from files. Kraft does a lot of stuff from files. I guess they make it a point to tell people, oh, this is from tapes. But nonetheless, this is very exciting. I've read recently that there's a resurgence of popularity with Steely Dan, not just among old farts with me, but among young people. And if you listen to Steely Dan's lyrics, that makes sense, because they're smart, they're snide, the music can be very dystopian. There's even a book called Quantum Criminals by a former Rolling Stone or Spin writer, Alex Papadamos. I actually think he's Rolling Stone, where they go into each character and expand on all the well-known characters, the Gaucho, all of them. I haven't started reading it yet, but it's pretty fascinating. I'll start with Pretzel Logic and what I thought of that. And the hi-fi system I'm using these to review with, I just got a pair of John DeVore Fidelity Oh Baby speakers in that I'm reviewing for Stereophile. I'm running those with, starting from the top, a Hana Umami Blue moving coil cartridge on a VPI Avenger Direct turntable with a Fat Boy tone arm, into a Manley Chinook phono stage, which is an astounding piece of work, into the Prima Luna Evo 400 integrated amplifier, and I'm using Auditorium 23 cables. This is obviously a very high-end rig, so I like to think that I can really hear the differences. And there are very stark differences in the original copies I have of these albums and the reissues. But in some ways, they're not stark. I don't know what a mint copy of Pretzel Logic goes for these days. You know, there were millions of these records pressed, so I sort of wonder why they're even being reissued, but we're living in a reissue frenzy time. Let's start with the jackets. They did a beautiful job with these jackets. I mean, they are perfect. I mean, even if you look at old Music Matters reissues, they don't often get it right. I mean, my original Pretzel Logic is a little brown. I think a smoker probably had this. But even the inside, they got it absolutely perfect. I mean, granted it's only black and white, but it's perfect. And this album is interesting to me. In one hand, because A, it's one of the few Steely Dan albums with acoustic guitars on it. B, I think there are actually throwaway songs on Pretzel Logic, just my opinion. This is really a transitional album. The next album is Katie Lied, which to me is a much more sophisticated album. They've thoroughly discarded their old rhythm section, well, at least Jim Hodder. They kept Jeff Skunk Baxter for Katie Lied and Denny Diaz, and they brought in Jeff Beccaro on drums. That album is, to me, a major step from Pretzel Logic. But Pretzel Logic, as well as having Ricky Don't Lose His Number, which was a number 8 hit in the US, the album was a huge hit. It has Night by Night, which has amazing guitar solos by Jeff Skunk Baxter. Any Major Dude Will Tell You, which I also like. It's such a quirky record. Barrytown is kind of odd. They cover Duke Ellington's East St. Louis Toodaloo. Parker's Band, which is dedicated to Charlie Parker. That's a great track. And to me, the rest of that side, except for Pretzel Logic, is kind of throwaway. They actually sound like stoner songs. Through with Buzz, With a Gun, Charlie Freak, Monkey in Your Soul. They're experiments that to me quite don't work. But the songs that are great are wonderful on this record. One thing I thought was really strange was that the original label, you know, since we're so hung up on doing original labels, this is the original label for Pretzel Logic, ABC. Yet for some bizarre reason, maybe someone knows, it's not the ABC file or label, it's just this really dull Geffen label. I don't remember what they did for Can't Buy a Thrill, but to me, that's just a little strange. There's not even a Geffen Records anymore, is there, folks? Ricky Don't Lose That Number was a bigger hit than anything on Countdown to Ecstasy. That was a huge hit. The main line rips off Horace Silver's Song for My Father. It's got a wonderful Victor Feldman intro. Great playing all around. Jim Gordon, the doomed Jim Gordon plays on this record. On Parker's Band, you're hearing both Jeff Beccaro and Jim Gordon. So that's one thing. The sound on this, let's get to the all-important sound. And I did make notes, because unlike some people who make these videos, my mind is not a steel trap. And I am going to get the UHQR 45 RPM, because I really want to hear those, both of these. I'm excited about that. In each instance, I played the original copy first, and then this new version. And for Pretzel Logic, the volume, the gain is much lower on the record itself than on my original of Pretzel Logic. As I was saying before my camera so rudely cut me off, the gain is lower on this reissue of Pretzel Logic, which is kind of odd. That's not something I hear very often, where the gain is lower. So in general, this recording sounds a little cleaner than my original version, as you might expect with digital files. It's slightly less forward. When there are big crescendos, it's definitely a little more forward. It's less warm, but cleaner overall than my original copy. What I found the coolest thing about this was, I don't know what they did, but the guitar solos really, really float right out from the speakers. That was really wild. And if you know Steely Dan records, these are some of the greatest rock and roll guitar solos of the 1970s up through the 80s. I mean, I have a tape somewhere, and I've mentioned this before, and I will find it, a bootleg tape that someone snuck in the studio while Fagen is listening back to guitar solos. You know, they would have 10 guys record the same guitar solo on the same song, not the same solo, and he is freaking out over this guitar solo. It's some song on Katie Lied. I think it's Chain Lightning, which might be on Countdown. No, it's on Katie Lied, and he is freaking out. It is so funny. I need to find that and use it somehow. But there's so many great guitar solos. The pair of Jeff Skunk Baxter and Denny Diaz on Pretzel Logic and on Countdown to Ecstasy is just, those guys are astounding. But the guitar solos really, really float, and things are a little bit cleaner. But as I said, in big crescendos, it's a little forward. So overall, I'm not crazy about the sound of the Pretzel Logic reissue. It just doesn't quite, I'm missing too much. I'm missing a sense of something organic. And a little rich that I do hear in the original. Now, in Countdown to Ecstasy, same thing, remastered by Bernie Grumman, cut from digital files. The lacquer's cut from digital files by Alex Abash, pressed at precision. I don't know if Pretzel Logic is pressed at precision. The UHQR is going to be pressed by a Clarity vinyl. And also interesting, I found that Fagen directly oversaw the remastering process for Countdown to Ecstasy. I haven't seen that same information for Pretzel Logic, though it may be the case. But generally speaking, I prefer the new Countdown to Ecstasy reissue to the new Pretzel Logic reissue. It's cleaner, there's more air, and big crescendos, it's not forward. Right off the bat, as soon as I put it on, it has a nice big low end, which is, you know, a trademark of a lot of 70s records. Everything is still tape. In some ways, that's the zenith of recording before people get into crazy amounts of channels. The bass drum has excellent weight and definition. The stereo guitars have good weight. There's a deep low end. It's full. It's very clean and coherent from the top of the frequency range right down through the bottom. Once again, you get that sense of guitars floating in space. On the songs like King of the World, where Fagen's vocals are double tracked, or probably just doubled somehow, I don't think he's singing twice, it's really, really apparent, and it's so clean, and it's very punchy, and has airier vocals. And I also notice on the reissue, it has a slightly wider stereo soundstage, and that really, really surprised me. Who knows? I mean, you got to figure both these albums, there were millions of copies of these sold, and I'm sure some copies sound better than others, even though both of my copies are in pristine shape. And in some way, you know, one of my favorite tracks on Countdown to Ecstasy is King of the World. That's definitely a dystopian track. It's like the end of the world, and they're just driving through the ruins of Santa Fe, and they're smoking coke, and they're doing whatever they're doing with coke, and it's really dark and bleak. And there's one part in the song where the vocals kind of do this zooming thing, that kind of zoop, and it's even more pronounced on the reissue, which really flipped me out. And also the bass lines are really clean. They're cleaner than on the original, and you really get to see what a great bass player Walter Becker was, because until like the latter albums, like with Asia and he's probably playing some bass on Asia, but I don't think he's playing any bass on Gaucho, never mind Two Against Nature or Everything Must Go. But he was a wonderful bass player as well, and being a great songwriter and lyricist. But overall, this version of Countdown to Ecstasy is cleaner. The snare drums are crisper. There's nothing forward. It's a very balanced, coherent presentation. And I really like the airiness of the vocals and the overall airiness of the upper mids through the treble. That kind of surprised me. So the top end was nice and smooth. It wasn't forward like Pretzel Logic is, which is weird because you'd think that Pretzel Logic being the third record, it would be superior sonically. On a different note, it's interesting because that Roger Nichols' daughter, Kimchi or Sissy or something, has been releasing all this amazing footage of Steely Dan on her YouTube channel. She was the first one to put out, it's been copied a bunch now, this great version of the second arrangement, which apparently was a song meant for Gaucho that I'd never even heard before, even though there were bootlegs falling around. But Roger Nichols' production on that track is so beautiful. It's a real gift to Steely Dan fans. And she's had all kind of stuff. She shows Becker and Fagen dancing in the studio and like home movies of Steely Dan. It's really something. If you just search, like Google Roger Nichols' daughter, it'll probably come up. But and on another tip, it's funny. I don't know if she had it first, but somehow there has arisen this Steely Dan Schlitz commercial from the 70s, and they write the jingle and everything, which is a lot of fun. But overall, I was really impressed with this. Not as impressed with that. Also with the, which is really hard to come by, I don't have it anymore, they also provide the original lyric sheet for Countdown to Ecstasy, and all the, oh, this is so funny, there's little notes for each track. Showbiz kids, the Don moves to LA and is forced to give an oral report. Pearl of the Quarter, which is about A Prostitute in the French Quarter, Ooh La La, King of the World, I Think My Face Is on Fire. You know, these are wonderful records. I'm glad they're reissuing them. I thought the first one sounded great. I didn't give it Countdown to Ecstasy a real serious listen, but I cannot wait to hear what they do with Katie Lied and Royal Scam. You know, like the Beatles in that way, each Steely Dan album is entirely different from the one that preceded it. They just kept growing and growing and growing, even though Asia and Gaucho have a kind of a similar LA sleekness to them. It's almost like Michael Mann could have produced the visuals for those records. But I'm excited about that, and when I get the UHQR of these other two, I don't know if I'll get Pretzel Lodge, but I'll definitely get the UHQR of Countdown to Ecstasy. I'll report on that. That should sound phenomenal. So thank you so much for watching my channel. And if you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.